It's Kat, and I'm back because what once was will be again. I don't have my thinking hat because I don't know where the hell it went to, but we are still going to use history, mythology, and astrology to divine the mysteries of the Game of Thrones. In this video, we're going to talk about Ashara Dayne, she of the mysterious violet eyes and the dark hair, who, along with her family, remains a constant but mysterious presence in our story of A Song of Ice and Fire. According to the history of A World of Ice and Fire, the Danes were among some of the first men who came across the land bridge from Essos into Westeros. There it is said the Danes saw a falling star, and they followed it until they found it upon an island in the mouth of a river. And there they saw a white stone, and so they built their keep and called it Starfall after the fallen star. And from this stone they created a sword called the Dawn, and only the most worthy may wield it, and this person is referred to as the Sword of the Morning. But equally, the Danes appear to have a much darker sword, and it's called Dark Star, and the person who wields it is called the Sword of the Evening. Ashara Dayne herself remains a source of much speculation amongst the characters within our story as well as the general fandom. She may or may not have had a relationship with a man. She may or may not have been in love. She may or may not have given birth to a child that may or may not have been a girl, and this girl may or may not have been stillborn. What we do know is that her brother, Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, was killed at the Tower of Joy when Ned came to rescue his sister Lyanna, and thereafter his bones were left in the mountains, and Ned returned the sword Dawn to the Dayne family. And after he did, he left with a boy child whose name is Jon Snow, and who may or may not be Ned Stark's bastard. As for Ashara Dayne, it is said that she threw herself from the Pelstone Tower of Starfall into the sea, but her body was never recovered, leading to much speculation that she may still be alive. We may not be able to come to any more absolute conclusions than anyone else through this video, at least not until Mr. Martin finished writing the story. However, Ashara's name, as well as her family residence of Starfall, and the origination story of her family give us some clues that may help us determine what her role is in this story. Our first clue is her name Ashara, because her name is one of the many names of the goddess. Though her name changed many times, her aspects and her symbols remain the same. She was the mother of all the gods. She was the mother goddess, the goddess of fertility, love, and war, and motherhood. As the goddess Moon and the star Venus, she was the consort of the sun god. And if you had caught the video series called The Lightbringer, then you would know that Venus the star is called the Lightbringer because she rose in the summer sky as the evening star, heralding the coming of the moon. And then in the winter, it is said that she had went into the underworld, where in the west she rises as the morning star, heralding the coming of the sun, and there she rules with a much darker lord. But then, as must always, she retreats again, only to be reborn, rising in the summer sky. Her other symbols include the owl and the snake, symbolizing wisdom. She is often depicted either riding on the back of a lion, riding in a chariot pulled by a pair of lions, or sitting on a throne flanked by a pair of lions. And this is because the star Venus, as she passes through the night sky, passes through the constellation Leo the Lion, and it could be said that Leo the Lion guards her path. In the Middle East, amongst the Israelites, before there was monotheism, there was Yahweh and his Ashara. And according to the Israelite traditions, Ashara's symbols included not only the star and the moon and the lions, but the eternal waters of youth and the tree of life. Her trees were most often erected near the altar of Yahweh, and nearby would be a fountain, and the oils from the fruits of her tree would be used to anoint the kings and the priests of her temple. Amongst the common people, she was worshipped in a grove of trees near a water source, and this was most often a fertility rite. The Greeks translated her name Ashara to mean the grove. In our story, one of Daenerys' most endearing and happy memories is that of her childhood spent at a house with a red door, and outside of her window grew a lemon tree, and in the courtyard was a water fountain. Amongst the Canaanites, she was known as Ashtoreth, and the story of Ashtoreth most closely tracks with the origination story of the Danes. According to the Canaanites, a star fell from the sky, and they followed it to where it landed, and there they found a black stone, and they began to worship it as the goddess Ashtoreth. Around it they built a temple. They called it Beth Ashtoreth, the house of the star. And according to tradition, the traditional Canaanite location for this meteorite was on a promontory that stuck out into the Jordan River. And on one side was the Yarmuk River that flowed into the Jordan River, and on the other side was a deep chasm, and at the head of this chasm was a waterfall. And here they built a city, Tel Ashtoreth, the city of the star. Asherah and Ashtoreth were both mentioned in the Bible several times. In Kings and Judges, Saul and his descendants spent much time trying to eradicate the worship of Asherah and Ashtoreth. Saul is also mentioning Tel Ashtoreth, where he believes it is almost impenetrable due to its natural defenses. On the Arabian Peninsula, she is worshipped as Athert, where, much like Ashtoreth, they saw a falling star which they followed till they found a black stone, and they worshipped her as a goddess, and she was referred to as the goddess by the sea, or the goddess that walked on the sea, and sometimes the goddess that walked on a dragon, probably because as the meteorite fell through the sky, it was thought to be a dragon, and then they began to worship her as a goddess. Thousands of years later, a man called Muhammad came along, and he came to the temple of the Quraysh, and he destroyed all the gods and goddesses except for one, and they called him Allah, and they left the black stone. From that day forward, it is now Mecca. Wherever these black stones fell, they were worshipped as a goddess. In Ephesus, in Turkey, a temple was built to Artemis surrounding this black stone, and on the island of Lacona, it is said to be sacred to the Amazons. There they built their own temple to Artemis around a black stone that served as their altar. All of these goddesses are an iteration of the originating Vedic all-goddess, Mother God, who gave birth to all the other gods and goddesses. And amongst her children were Danu. She was the goddess of the water. She was the mother of dragons. Amongst the Eastern traditions, the Buddhists, the Taoists, and the Shaolins, who also took their traditions from the Vedic religion, there arose a goddess, and her name was Guan Yin. Guan Yin was known as she who walks on water, or she who rides the dragon. According to legend, she was the daughter of a mighty king who wanted her to marry for a political alliance. But she refused, instead demanding to become a nun. Her father, angry with her continued refusals, sent her to the monastery, but there he gave orders that she was to be worked day and night and given the hardest tasks. But, as it was soon discovered, that she did so joyfully, and that she was able to commune with the animals and the birds who helped her to do her tasks. Being angered by her continual refusal and her ability to reject his most harshest punishments, her father sent someone to burn down the temple. But Guan Yin, seeing the flames, put them out with her bare hands, and she was uninjured. But her father was still determined to kill her, and so he sent an executioner. And first he tried with a sword, and then he tried with an axe, and both times they shattered. On the third time, the executioner was determined to kill her with his bare hands. Guan Yin, realizing that her father would not be satisfied without her death, allowed the executioner to strangle her. But during so, she took his guilt and all the guilt of all his other executions upon herself. And so, having so much guilt, she descended into the underworld, into the hell. But there again, she played music and sang and turned hell into a virtual paradise. And by all the good karma that she had stored up, she was able to release the souls of those stuck in hell back to earth and even into heaven. And by doing so, she earned eternal forgiveness, which allowed her to ascend into heaven. But as she was ascending into heaven, she heard the cries of all the souls who were trapped on earth in a continual cycle of death and rebirth, doomed to live their lives again until they got it right. And so she descended once again to earth. Ere she is said to be determined to break the will of suffering. And so she is called the Mother of Mercy. Turning west again, back to the central steppes of Asia, there she is Mater Kubalaya, the Mother of the Mountains. And she was translated to the Roman pantheon as Sibyl, also pronounced Kibble because they didn't have a sound for a C. But she was the mother of all the gods. And in the Greco-Roman pantheon, she is known as Rhea, the sister wife of Cronus, who gave birth to all the gods and goddesses, including their replacements, Hera and Zeus. And her daughter, Hera, took on the aspects of the goddess of motherhood, as well as hearth and home. But her daughter, Demeter, took on the aspects of fertility, and it is Demeter's daughter, Persephone, the personification of spring, who travels into the underworld during the winter and arises during the spring. And it is Rhea's son Poseidon and his spouse who birthed the daughter Venus, the star that rises in the night sky, Venus who arrived on a stormy sea. Even further west, she was Rhiannon, the great queen. And Rhiannon gave birth to Danu, who was also a water goddess. And Danu was the mother of the Tuatha De Danann, who were those Siddhi, the fairies, the spirits that could be both good and evil. Just as in the Vedic tradition, Danu was not only the mother of dragons, but she was the mother of the Danavas, those spirits that could be both good and evil. Rhiannon also had a son, but we're going to talk about that in another video. What you should have gathered as we've gone along is that this goddess is reiterated across time and cultures. But not only does she reiterate throughout cultures, she often gives birth to her next iteration directly. So who do I think Ashara Dayne is? I think she's the mother of dragons. I think she is she who walks on water. She who rides the dragon. If you caught the Lightbringer series, you would know that the person I believe is her daughter, Daenerys, is currently following the path of Venus through Essos and will be continuing to do so into Westeros, where she will arrive on the winds of winter. And although the North apparently had a problem remembering where its loyalties lay, the internet does not forget. And sometime in the distant past, someone, in writing a synopsis for this story, said that it was a magical adventure and it would culminate at Starfall. So thank you very much. Remember the goddess. Hit the like button. Leave a comment. I'll talk to you later.